Let's try and understand the new economic policies that Kamala Harris is hoping to implement. The current Vice President, Kamala Harris, she's hoping to appeal to the middle class in order to boost her chances. She is set to propose new benefits to entrepreneurs and small business owners. She says that this will spur the creation of millions of new businesses as part of a second wave of economic proposals. Now, that is set to be unveiled on Wednesday. There are talks of expanding a tax deduction and removing regulatory hurdles. In fact, let's try get all the sides of this new proposal, and to discuss this further, we have with us, we still have Bianca Shah from the South Asians for Harris Group, Andre Bauer, Senior Advisor to the Trump campaign, and Professor Scott Lucas, founder, the EA Worldwide Emeritus Professor of International Politics from the University of Birmingham. Let me start by asking you, Mr. Bauer, how do you think Harris's economic policies will differ from Trump's, and do you think they'll be more or less effective here?
Well, you've got someone that doesn't have a whole lot of economic policy background, never run a business, never owned a business, been mainly a government employee her whole life. I know her personally. I know her very, very well. Matter of fact, we've been to India together. We've traveled for 2 years together. We know each other very, very well, and I like her a lot. But Donald Trump's policies are from a businessman who's had many successful businesses, who had 4 years of economic robust activity, tax cuts that really spurred economic development. Just giving away money to start a new business or giving a tax credit for people to start a new business that have never had a business before, that's not the best policy. Nothing wrong with giving a tax credit for people to start them, but you got to have something else so they know what they're doing. People have never had a business. All of a sudden, if you think they're just randomly going to start a business and have success, it really doesn't work that way. If they don't have a background, if they don't have some knowledge, there's got to be more. And we've seen this in giveaway house programs where we say we're going to give somebody this much money to buy a new house, and a few years later they don't own the house. The house is not in good shape anymore because they didn't know how to deal with that. And so when you look at economic policy, one person has a proven track record and one doesn't have a record at all.
All right. Before I go to Professor Lucas, I want to ask Bianca Shah, what are your expectations from Harris's new economic policies, and how do you think they'll address the current economic challenges there?
Yes, sorry. Thank you for having me again. I believe that she's attempting to address those key barriers that are preventing people that do have those ideas, people that may have some of that entrepreneurial spirit and, otherwise ability to get involved in this, economic system in this country. She's helping to remove those barriers and provide them with those resources that they would need to be able to get started. So by addressing those key barriers, allowing people who have not traditionally been a part of the system or have the resources to get involved, she's allowing, this economy to become larger, to become, more accessible to others. And, ultimately, like we said, creating those jobs, creating more opportunities for those who are in the middle class who have not, already had that proven track record, because, some folks may be able to have that success. They just have not had the opportunity in the past yet. Okay.
Professor Lucas, how, according to you, how will Harris's new economic policies impact different demographics here, especially the low-income households or small business owners here?
Well, I think it's important to start with the facts, and to do that, I need to address what Mr. Bauer has also said.
Yeah.
Rather than personal attacks, Donald Trump is someone who has been declared bankrupt 6 times. Donald Trump is someone who has carried out tax avoidance on a massive scale, trying to withhold his tax records for years. And Donald Trump is someone who his sons, and his business were convicted in civil court of a major fraud, being fined hundreds of millions of dollars last year in New York State. Kamala Harris has been a prosecutor, not a business person, but we need to be fair when addressing people rather than just saying Trump is a businessman. She wasn't. In terms of the policies, I think we need to be specific here about what the policies are. We're talking not only about cutting regulations on small businesses, making it easier for them to operate, as well as giving them tax deductions. We're talking about the Harris proposal to benefit first-time buyers with a housing credit, to try to provide incentives to builders to build more housing, to punish investors that buy up housing. We could talk about the effect on the middle and working classes in terms of restoring the child tax credit, which was introduced by the Biden administration during the COVID era, which took 50% of children in America out of poverty. And we could talk, for example, about the healthcare proposals to extend the subsidies on premiums under the Affordable Care Act and to limit the prices of prescription drugs. Now, you may disagree with those policies, and we could talk about it, but you need to represent them fairly rather than a sweeping statement that they're just giveaway of money. That just flatly isn't true. Donald Trump, in contrast, really does not propose many specific policies apart from two that I think should be identified and considered. One is to continue the cut in corporation tax from 21% to 15%. Rather than raising it as Harris would. And his second proposal is to extend the tax cuts of 2017, which generally benefit the wealthiest Americans rather than the middle and working class.
Okay. Mr. Bauer, you would want to react to that?
Yeah, all this is a word salad on big liberalism. It's not stuff that creates jobs. If you raise taxes,
it's ridiculous.
You will make jobs go away. They repatriated billions of dollars because of tax cuts of people that just go offshore. Look, I create jobs. The professor there, he couldn't create a job if he had a bag of bread and a loaf of bread and a bunch of bologna sandwich. He couldn't sell a sandwich. He's going to tell you all about business, but he doesn't know anything. I create jobs. Trump creates jobs. You can say he's not successful. He's a billionaire. Go check. I know Kamala. She's been a lifelong government bureaucrat. Those aren't people that know how to create jobs. If they are, she's the vice president of the United States right now, the second most powerful position in the world. Why aren't they doing it now? Why is the economy so bad under 3.5 years of President Biden? Why did it get so bad? He's got her leadership right at the side. They've already booted him out. She's now the commander in chief in theory. Why isn't it happening now? Tell me what they're doing now. We still have many months where they're in leadership roles now. So to tell me that a tax cut is going to help people start a business, you're not paying taxes. The tax cut doesn't help.
Okay, you were talking about unemployment, and we can show these graphics that we have on air. The unemployment rate during Donald Trump's regime, it was at its peak. What do you have to say about that then?
I have to say you're using a time during COVID when we shut the country down. I mean, that's not really a fair. Go back and show when COVID came to the end. Give me gas prices now versus when Donald Trump was in office. Give me what a carton of milk was then. Tell me what people's real wage was then. All these are, again, we've seen the last 3 years of what's happened in the economy. We now see what's happening where they're lying about actual jobs and having to redo the numbers because they're actually fudging what the unemployment numbers are. Look at the economy. We've had 3.5 years of Biden and Harris. If you believe that's working, then you vote for that team. If you don't think it's working, you better think about something else. Why do you think RFK Jr. has decided to support Donald Trump? Why do you think Gabby Gifford has decided to support Donald Trump? Why do you think Meghan McCain's daughter, her mother is a appointee from Biden, she's going, wait a minute. Even she's going, this is a little scary when you look at Tim Walz, for example, and his economic policy. Again, never had a job other than a government job. He's never owned a business. He doesn't own a stock portfolio.
All right. Just let's try and get a reaction from Professor Scott as well. On one hand, we talked about unemployment being on the rise at its peak during Donald Trump's regime. But when you look at Biden's regime as well, we get your point. Mr. Bauer. But when you look at Mr. Biden's regime, you see inflation was at its peak. How do you compare that then?
Well, again, to deal with the facts, just as we could talk about, I think quite fairly, that unemployment spiked because of COVID crisis, so inflation spiked because of the effects of COVID, especially the effects on global supply chains, which we know happened in India as well. That meant inflation in 2022 did reach 9%. But Mr. Bauer should probably note, if he cares to discuss facts, that inflation is now below 3%. So it has come down significantly.
You're in a fantasy.
The U.S. GDP growth has risen by 5%. The fact of the matter is, Mr. Bauer.
All right, Mr. Bauer, we'll come to you. We'll come to you for your response. Let Mr. Scott finish. Let Professor Scott finish first.
Mr. Bauer, you seem to be a bit agitated.
Okay, Mr. Bauer, we'll listen to you. Let Mr. Scott finish, and we'll come to you.
Yeah, but I do think that even though Mr. Bauer has been relatively short on facts, I think his approach is one which is going to be important for assessing what goes forward in the election. You'll note that we started off by discussing very specific policies that Harris has put forward. And you could talk about those policies. You can debate whether or not, in terms of housing, healthcare, education, small businesses, they are good or not. But you notice that Mr. Bauer's approach, and I say this not to target him, but to talk about the Trump campaign's approach, will be don't discuss the specifics of the policies. Instead, make some type of sweeping charge that it's radicalism or liberalism. Make some, in other words, don't actually deal with that and try to elevate the fear out there. Try to elevate the idea that somehow it'll be American carnage, Donald Trump's words. And I think decide what's a toss-up election. Do you actually have Americans really going to vote on the details of these issues, going to vote on what they think will be better for them on a day-to-day basis by assessing those issues, or will it be the culture of fear that's really whipped up by the Trump folks? And I think, Ms. Shah also, who has been very careful to elaborate the Harris policies, I suspect that that's what the Harris campaign is also watching as well. How can you get these points across?
All right, one quick response for Mr. Bauer and Bianca on this very point that Professor Scott has mentioned. Mr. Bauer, you go first.
I don't even know where to begin. If there is one person watching your show that believes we have inflation that's only 3%, how is gas double? How is milk double? How is bread double? Where are we coming up with 3%? It's a bold-faced lie. It's a lie. Tell me what the gas price when Donald Trump left office and what it is now, Professor, since you're so smart.
I can tell you that right now.
Mr. Bauer, let me also get a word from Bianca Shah.
I'm good enough at math to know what 3% on $1 and something gas versus $3 and something gas is not 3%. It's 100%.
All right, Mr. Bauer, let Bianca Shah also get in. Come in here.
We want to know what the price of gas was when
Donald Trump left office. Your final words, Bianca Shah, on this. I'm really sorry. We'll have to cut this short because of time constraint. Bianca Shah, your final word on this.
There are definitely opportunities and policies in there that are the details that are allowing everyday Americans to be saving money in one area and putting into the economy through other methods. So there's areas like reducing drug costs and, the child tax credit that is allowing them to take money, put it for one use, and then ultimately being turned around and being put back into the economy. And that is where the details of her policies ultimately have economic benefits for this country. And I'll end it there for you all.
Okay, all right. Well, fascinating conversation there. Thank you, everyone, for being a part of this discussion and giving us your valuable inputs there.